Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody, welcome to Heel Heat. This is a Heel Heat Top 10. And the topic of the conversation, as you might have guessed by the t-shirt and the necklace, it's Top 10 Wrestlers in the History of Juggalo Championship Wrestling. Organization started by the Insane Clown Posse, where they were such big wrestling fans they decided to do their own thing. Let's jump right into it. Number 10 is a guy that I think could have been a huge major star if he didn't have the demons he had and wasn't fighting addiction for most of his wrestling life, and that's Trent Acid. Trent Acid had that it factor, whether he was part of the Backseat Boys, whether he was here in JCW, Ring of Honor, CZW, or any other organization he wrestled for. He always stood out on the card and he always made an impact. And he was a guy, I think, he transcended what you seen on the screen, whether it be DVD, video, or whatever you watched. He came through and you were enthralled by watching him. Sadly, his life ended a little bit short. He lost his battle with drug addiction like a lot of our wrestling friends do. Unfortunately, he's going to be one that's not as remembered as some of the others because he was mostly an independent wrestler, but a fantastic talent that I suggest you go out and look for, whether you look down YouTube, whether you buy some of the old JCP DVDs, or if you go and buy some of the old Combat Zone DVDs, or even what I would recommend is his greatest match and my favorite of his matches, WrestleRate 2003, him versus Homicide in Ring of Honor. Wonderful match. And I know we're talking about Juggalo Championship Wrestling. Just wanted to mention a little bit more about Trent Acid. A guy that doesn't really get talked about a lot, but he is a guy that I thought could have been a big, huge star in wrestling. Again, if it wasn't for the demons. Now coming up, our number 9 guy kind of plays into some of those same demons. Only in JCW will you see a character like the Weed Man. I mean, what can I say? A hero that comes to the ring smoking weed, uses weed to power up. I mean, his whole gimmick is he's a big stoner. Can't go wrong with that. I mean, it's a funny and an interesting gimmick. He has a loyal following within the JCW fan base. He's a guy that is going to move up and up this list the more time goes on, the more he stays with JCW, the more we see him becoming a JCW legend, which he already is, but he'll start to pass some of the guys in front of him. I think he's an interesting guy, fun guy. I love the stuff he does with Officer Colt Cabana. I think it's an awesome pairing between the two. It's one of the weird instances where Cabana's a bad guy, and just funny, fun stuff, which is mostly what JCW is about, is having fun in wrestling and bringing it back to just doing goofy things because the fans like goofiness every now and then. Now our number 8 guy is one of the first JCW World Champions, and that is Vampiro. He's a guy that most wrestling fans associate with ICP because of their combination on WCW television. He also, at one point, was helping book JCW as well as being a main talent in JCW. He's a guy that's been in and out of JCW at times, laid the groundwork, brought a star into the company, and helped to, for fans that aren't ICP fans, that are wrestling fans, but also that are Vampiro fans, came to the company to watch him, which brought some eyes, which continued to grow the product of JCW. Great guy, I think, much like Trent Acid, he had the it factor. He is a major star in Mexico, and he's a pretty big star in America as well. I think he could have even went bigger, but politics have ruined him, and reportedly his own personal attitude and demons as well. Now our number 8 guy, or I'm sorry, our number 7 guy, been hanging out with the Weed Man, I guess, forgetting my numbers, is another guy that also hangs out with the Weed Man, And one of the guys that really is all about the JCW style. JCW is kind of a Combat Zone, ECW, XPW style, IWA mid-style style, where they have a lot of deathmatch / hardcore wrestling, but they also mix in some comedy. And this is a guy that fits in there perfectly, and that's the Necro Butcher. One of the great deathmatch wrestlers of the last 20 years, probably the most famous deathmatch wrestler of the last 20 years or so. Necro comes in, he brings his own style, he brings his own brutality, he sets it up, and he sets the pace for what they want to do with their show and what kind of wrestling they like. Now, I'm not saying that it's all about hardcore blood and guts violence, it's not. But Necro also has a personality. He's a funny guy, he really is. If you watch some of his interviews, especially his JCW stuff, he's a really interesting and fun guy, a really smart guy that gets it. And he's a guy, I would say, that's pretty much embodies what JCW is about. Now, our number 6 guy is probably the biggest wrestling superstar to be a prominent part of JCW, and that's Raven. Another guy, much like Vampiro, who had ties to ICP while they were in WCW. Raven came in, kind of gave him, like Vampiro, gave him a guy that was a wrestling star outside of JCW, continued to be a guy that would come into JCW, whether it be tag teams, reforming the Gathering in JCW with ICP, and at that time Balls Mahoney. I mean, he's a guy that brought credibility from the wrestling world to this little renegade promotion run by 2 rappers, which, you know, is always a plus. Raven's a guy, the only reason he's not probably higher on here is all the guys ahead of him have had more, I want to say they've been on more JCW shows, they've done more for the company. He's a guy that brought eyes and had you watching the show and had you being interested in what they do. Now, our number 5 guy, much like the Necro Butcher, is a deathmatch specialist. That's Madman Pondo. All the way back to the beginning of JCW, Pondo's been a guy that's been featured prominently in the organization. He's a guy that's been anti-ICP, pro-ICP, gone back and forth with it. And he's a guy, much like Necro Butcher, has a huge underground cult following. A guy that, you know, cut his teeth in the areas like IWA Mid-South and XPW, and really brought that style, helped, like I said, they helped lay the groundwork for what JCW was about. And Pondo's probably, other than, I would say Pondo is probably the best heel in JCW's history. They really don't have heel faces. They do some for comedy reasons. You know, they did knockoffs of Kid Rock and Eminem. Stuff like that, they've done heels like such, Officer Colt Cabana. But Pondo was probably the best serious heel that they had on the company at any time frame. Now, our number 4 guy is kind of a mix between what Raven and Vampiro brought to the company and what Pondo and Necro brought to the company. And that's our friend Sabu. One of the guys that was the faces of ECW, one of the guys that wrestling fans all over the world love and adore, came in, basically he's friends with ICP. Comes in, does shows for them. He's been a world champion, he's been a solid member, puts on great matches after great matches. What can you say about Sabu that hasn't been said already? One of the true innovators in the sport of wrestling. When it comes to JCP, he doesn't hold back, he lets it all fly, he lets you see why you should be watching Juggalo Championship Wrestling and why you should still be paying attention to Sabu, because he's still relevant to this day, and he's still a guy that even at his advanced age with all the injuries and all the wear and tear on his body, can put on a very compelling match. Now our number 3 guy is pretty much a homemade talent, and that's Too Tough Tony. A guy that has been around ICP even before JCW, decided, you know, he's going to get into the business, he's going to start wrestling. Another guy that I think, in my opinion, he's one of the few guys that really embodies what Juggalo Championship Wrestling is about. He's a juggalo, and he's a wrestler. Basically, what more can you say? I mean, he's a guy, he comes in there, he's, again, like a lot of these guys, he's a deathmatch style wrestler, specialist, but he has his own comedy, his own flavor added to that. He's a very interesting character. One of the guys, like I said, that's kind of a homegrown talent there. Now our number 2 guy is probably the most successful wrestler in the history of JCP, and that's Corporal Robinson. He's been there from the beginning, retired a few years back. I haven't seen where he's made a comeback as of yet. If he has, I'm sorry that I'm wrong. I haven't seen every single JCP DVD or show or release. He may have done some at the Gathering of the Juggalos that I don't know about. But he's a guy, much like Too Tough Tony, who's primarily a homegrown talent, a guy that's primarily known for his Juggalo Championship Wrestling stuff. And he's the flag bearer. He's the guy that when they had feuds with JCP versus IWA Mid-South or versus Pro Wrestling Unplugged, he was the flag bearer for the Clowns and for ICP and the Juggalos. And he kept, you know, he's, like I said, he's kind of the Sting or the Undertaker of Juggalo Championship Wrestling. He's really the standard bearer of what they're about, what success you can have there, and a guy that is their homegrown guy that basically has been the most successful guy they've ever had there in their company. Now, before we get to our number 1, if you've seen our top 10s before, we do a little thing called Best of the Rest. And these are guys that just barely made the list for whatever reason. In no particular order, we're going to go right into that. First is Nasawa, a Japanese wrestler who is covered in ICP-related tattoos, psychopathic tattoos, Dark Lotus on his chest. The guy loves ICP. He is a juggalo. He's represented the Juggalos in every company he's ever wrestled for. I would have loved to put him in this top 10 list. Unfortunately, I just don't think he has the impact that the other guys do. Sad to say, he's probably the biggest Juggalo, other than Too Tough Tony and Corporal Robinson, in the whole history of JCP. He's probably the biggest fan of what they're doing. But he just didn't make it into the top 10. Sorry, not everybody does. Now our second guy is the original JCW champion, and that is Evil Dead. The only reason he didn't make the list is his career was kind of short in JCW. I keep wanting to say JCP for Jim Crockett Promotions, and I probably have said it a few times on here. I'm sorry, folks. The letters are very similar. But Evil Dead is played by, and I'm going to break kayfabe, so sorry guys, played by Jump Steady, who is Violent J's brother. Evil Dead, if you've never seen anything he did, his name is what he is. He's a guy that's dead, barely moves in the ring, gets in very little offense, falls on top of a guy, and gets a win. And that's all it is. It was tremendously entertaining. It sounds stupid when I say it. It sounds ridiculous. But if you go back and you watch it, you'll be like, oh my god, this guy is amazing. It's funny. It's great. I get it. You will get it. It absolutely, what he did with that character is astounding. I thoroughly enjoyed his interpretation of that. And last but not least, our Best of the Rest, Officer Colt Cabana. We mentioned him earlier with his feud with the Weed Man. And the thing I really love about it is Colt has fully bought into the fact that he's a heel in JCW, and he's out there to arrest guys like the Weed Man and bring order to a company that has no laws, no limits, and no order. I think he's an awesome character, and he's someone. If you don't like Colt Cabana, you don't like pro wrestling. Basically, he embodies professional wrestling in every form that you can think of. But before we go into our number one, this is the time where I tell you guys, if you like this list, if you think, or you don't, let us know what you think. Hit us up in our comments. If you think we put someone up too high, place someone down too low. If there's someone you think we forgot altogether and left them off the list completely, let us know what you think. Hit us up on our Facebook, hit us up on Twitter, put it down there in the comments. Let us hear your opinions. We love hearing back from you guys, our friends out there that watch this. We do it for us and we do it for you. So let us know what you think about this. Last but not least, our number one wrestlers in the history of JCW, and I kind of let the cat out of the bag by saying wrestlers instead of wrestler, the Insane Clown Posse. What can I say? Without ICP, there is no JCW. They've been tag champions, they've been the main event of the shows, they've done solo stuff, they've kept the vibe, they've provided the theme music, they've provided the commentary, they've backed the wrestling organization. Absolutely fabulous guys. They love wrestling, they love their music, they love their fans, they love the Juggalos. They give us exactly what we ask for and what we want. And they have tapped into something really special here with Juggalo Championship Wrestling. It's not for everybody. It's for the Juggalos. It's for the guys that grew up watching guys like the ECW guys or Bruiser Brody, Abdullah the Butcher, and are a little bit disenfranchised with the stuff that TNA or WWE or even Ring of Honor puts out. This gives us what we are basically what we grew up loving. For the people that love ICP, a lot of them, like myself, I'm a huge ICP fan. I consider myself a juggler. We love ICP, and for the same reasons we love ICP, we love guys like Bruiser Brody. We loved guys like Abdullah the Butcher, Terry Funk, Cactus Jack. I mean, we love that style, and kind of their music and that style of wrestling are kind of a perfect fit for each other. They're guys that get it, that are wrestling fans and trained wrestlers first. They've wrestled in every major promotion of the last 20 years. They've wrestled at ECW, WCW, WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, you name it, they've been there, they've done that, and they created their own thing. They made a success. They're two guys that became a success. Violent J and Shaggy 2 Dope are a success without any help from anybody in the music industry, the movie industry, the wrestling industry. They did everything they did on their own. They absolutely deserve to be the top guys on this list. They absolutely are an astounding example of the American way. With enough know-how, with enough talent, with enough drive, you could do anything you want. You could be a big-time rap stars. For 20 years, they've been big-time rap stars, making millions of dollars, selling out tours everywhere, legions of fans all over the United States and the world, successful wrestlers, and run a successful wrestling company. At one point, they were the #2 wrestling company in the world. And they're probably still up there. I would say they're probably #3, maybe #4. Ring of Honor may have surpassed them at this point. And they don't run a lot of shows, or they probably would be 3 or 2 even. But ICP, the Insane Clown Posse, they did their thing. They created something for their fans, and they made something that's wonderful for wrestling fans that are Juggalos, for wrestling fans that are just wrestling fans that don't give two shits about ICP. They still can watch a JCW DVD or a JCW internet pay-per-view or go to the gathering of the Juggalos and have a great time watching the wrestling that's presented there. But basically, that's all I have to say about this top 10. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of Heel Heat.